and welcome back to Fuel Market. Today what I'm going to be talking about is actually starting a series that I am going to be covering over the next couple of months. And one of the things that I'm going to be talking about, or one of the larger topics that I want to talk about, is marketing. And marketing specifically for the standpoint of getting your business out there and also making the marketing your business. Now, typically speaking, when you think about making money from a social media platform, this really came from the idea of YouTube. So, when you think of like early social media, I think, largely of MySpace. That's probably my generation's initial push, even though that got completely ruined. But you had MySpace, and yeah, it had ads on there, but it was really just meant as like, put whatever you want on there, and here's my page. And Facebook really streamlined that, cleaned it up, was able to link accounts, and a lot of really good things. Like, I'm not here to complain about what early Facebook was, but initially there was not so many ads and it wasn't as targeted. The same was true of Google. Like, you didn't have as much ad space, and that's really what helped Google take over in terms of becoming the number one search engine. So what is now the case is that there's ads everywhere, and if you really want to sell things and to get your name out there, you pretty much have to advertise on Facebook, on Instagram, on Google. I'm missing a couple. Like, those are really the big ones. I think Google pretty much, gets the ad space from like the Twitters and so on and so forth. So because all this advertising revenue is out there, you have something like YouTube, which was really just kind of a weird upload thing, that you have all these viral videos that are making millions and millions and millions of views, with the idea that, one, it's free speech. So like, I remember when they were having civil wars, like the entirety of the kind of like the Arab Spring, a lot of what was happening with these dictators, even though it was violent and whatever else, it was being uploaded. It was kind of like, we are the bastion of America and free speech, and we're going to make sure that all of these trifled voices are heard. And the initial people that were kind of putting actual programming onto the internet at that idea, because like, you're really starting at the beginning of digital media and actually being able to get, before that you're kind of the old DV tapes, and then you got to like put that on the computer. It was a process back in the day if you were actually using kind of digital cameras, or what kind of went for digital cameras at the time. I remember the mini DV, and then you also, before that, you had like the High 8 tapes, which I even remember Quentin Tarantino coming out at the time of Pulp Fiction in 1994 and saying that the one scene that got cut, they did all of this testing, that High 8 millimeter digital was the way to make an independent film. I remember that being a big deal. So this has been going on for a while, and you could actually, if you had a channel on YouTube, you could make enough money to quit your day job. You could actually make a living making videos, not unlike what I'm trying to do, and getting it out there. And then over time, the gatekeepers decided who would have access to that platform. As everyone blamed social media for the 2016 election, I would argue that you're dealing with free speech, so that's not bad, but everyone blamed the Russians, disinformation, saying things that weren't true. So you create a rumor, it's online, it spreads, so on and so forth. So the idea of having people hear information and making up their own minds is a problem. Like, they don't want that. People are too easy to manipulate, which is kind of a weird thing when you think of like Operation Mockingbird and all of this like CIA declassified things where they were paying news anchors to get the official story out there, which is just terrifying. We don't really know all the stories that they manipulated. And then you have all of the Alex Joneses and such, which are essentially being like, oh, like, they're lying about me. This is where we're catching the media in lies. And then you have Julian Assange with WikiLeaks, and you have like the biggest bombshell of the 2016 election to me, which no one seems to talk about, is that they have the DNC talking about rigging both primaries. The idea that you have one Bernie winning the Democratic primary, and then they're like, we don't want Bernie, so we're going to install Hillary, who's the company person in there, and then you have on the other side they pushed Trump to win, even though he wasn't going to win the primaries. And I think that one of the things that was in there is that they really didn't want Rand Paul, because in all of the polling data that had been done pre-election, they had found that Rand had the highest chance of beating her because he's a sensible person, and they were like, we don't want him to win because we think that he could win in the general election, so we need the easiest candidate for Hillary to defeat, and that was Trump. So like both sides were rigged, and I still kind of look back at that and just think like, when you look at 2016 Bernie and Rand, like that would have been like the most civilized, like let's talk about policy. Like I don't imagine either person like, bringing each other's families into it and name calling. I mean, I did enjoy the Trump circus a little bit, but like from a nationwide healing standpoint, I still think Rand versus Bernie is a good thing in revisionist history of what America could have been. But, we got what we got, and the reason why we know about that is because of WikiLeaks. And the idea that like even something like our elections are not secure. And it also makes sense because like really the only election that actually matters is the general election. Like in terms of what the parties do in terms of how they run their own internal nominations, like that really can't be registered because they're independent things. Like they're not part of the government. They're just like they exist. Like they're private political entities that really aren't beholden to anything, which is scary enough in its own right. So, like that is my takeaway from the 2016. So then what you end up happening is a reversal to where anything that goes against the official narrative, which I don't even consider liberalism at this point. I mean, it's leftism, I think, but it's more so than that. It's statism. Because essentially now with we don't have a free economy, what we end up with is these conglomerates create regulations, which, it kind of hurts them, but it runs all their competition out. So you have all of these basically monopolies or oligarchies within different sectors, and the little guys can't compete. There's no competition within business anymore. So you now have businesses and big corporations in bed with government. That's basically that's the opposite of free market capitalism. That is essentially fascism or some form of communism or socialism, however you want to look at it. I mean, you can't really separate the socialism out of National Socialism, which I feel like nobody's going to get that that's Nazism. But that's essentially where we're going to. And when you look back at what was happening with the Occupy Wall Street movement, where everybody was against all these big companies, now somehow they're all cool because they believe in LGBTQ and all these things. So like the companies are on our side, so therefore we allow them to do all the things about destroying the environment. And like I don't think that people realize that like now corporations are mostly owned by China, which is also a state government. So therefore they're now dictating to the corporations here to push our government into creating regulations to topple our country in China's. Like it's all this nonsense that like nobody seems to be watching or paying attention to or to be caring about. And it's the only competition that they have a chance with is for them to control freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, which is why I am here on BitChute. However, I would like to talk about, I made a video on why I'm exclusive to BitChute. I would like at the end of this is probably going to be like a 3 to 6 months, to be honest with you, series of videos talking about what the other options are, what you could be doing out there. So the things I want to be looking at is the speech really free? So, one of the good things as a kind of a catch-all statement is, could Alex Jones be on there? But I also wanted to look at that from both the conservative and the liberal standpoint. So one of the problems that's happening is on your, say, Twitter, for instance, is that anything with a conservative thought has been relegated to it's hateful. So I can relate to this when I was in college, that I was much more libertarian than I was conservative back then. I try to turn everything into fiscal policy, which I still think is very good to do, but I also think that it doesn't address cultural issues that definitely need to be addressed. But when you look at things just like taxation and fiscal policy, there's really nothing social about it. Like, these are just responsible things that organizations should do to be, to be able to maintain and continue onward. And I was being told I was a racist because it's code to cut taxes, meaning that what you're doing is cutting social programs, which are going to disparately affect, people who are poor. And it's like, when people who are poor are generally, minorities, so therefore you wanting to cut taxes is code for you hating black people. And it's like, oh my God, like this is such reductive reasoning, because I grew up in a really poor area who, largely are negatively affected by these programs. I mean, those programs negatively affect communities. So I would imagine that, like, in areas that are, higher concentration of different ethnicities, that it negatively affects them too. So like, I pulled myself out of those circumstances of being a poor guy who grew up in West Virginia. And trust me, there is rampant poverty in West Virginia. And that's maybe a whole separate video there. But trust me, it is as bad as any major city I've ever been to. It is so bad there. Like, the drug problems, the murder rates, it's really bad there in the town that I grew up in. Like it's funny, like in the 80s, it was like named the safest city in America. And there was one year where we hit the trifecta of highest murder per capita, highest drug overdoses per capita, and highest obesity rate per capita. So yes, I know what I'm talking about. Is conservative speech protected? Is liberal speech protected? Because like, I think that there are perspectives that the liberals have that we need to address. Like, you cannot have an echo chamber, because I feel like even what conservatism has meant since I've been alive has changed tremendously, and we need these sorts of ideas to prosper. Like, you need to have your ideas challenged, and obviously the left right now is not debating people. It is not having open debate with intelligent people. So, it's just the idea of, you're not allowed to speak. If you are speaking, you're a racist. And then trying to alienate, push people off the platform. And then when people are like, where did so-and-so go? Oh, he said something really racist because he is a racist. And, here's the pressure. If you like him, you're a racist too. And that's a horrible way to have a debate in this country of any kind. So, having even the most absurd liberal things being protected is important, because I find that a lot of these free speech platforms, what they really are is conservative echo chambers. And what you end up with is the liberals being reported in kind of like you reported us and you got us off Twitter, so on this conservative Twitter alternative, we're going to report you and this is ours and haha, so on and so forth. One of the bastions of free speech that I actually do care about, because as I've said before, it's actually something that I do. You can look in my link tree. Is I am very open sexually, and is sexual, and I'm not saying like full on porn, but like, what is the moral standards and decencies of like, hey, come look at my OnlyFans, come look at my other pages. Hey, I'm going to be kind of explicit in terms of how I talk about my body and those sorts of things, because I think sexual health is very important. So like, what is Place's records with banning that? How much money can you make from it? And which I feel like kind of varies in how you look at these different platforms, because like, you have YouTube, which is monetized. So if you have a big channel, not only are you making ad revenue, you can have sponsorships, you can have affiliate links, which is really how you make most of your money. So like, there's all sorts of ways, not to mention things like Patreon and so forth. And even a lot of those types of sites, which I'm not really going to get into, like the Patreon type of things, even those have been, hate speech and things. And like, one of the other things is like, a lot of major players in the game, like they'll be on YouTube and they'll be like, I'm going to follow YouTube's guidelines. YouTube then changes their guidelines, and then they retroactively, something that you made 3 years ago you didn't anticipate the change we were going to make, so now we're going to kick it off. Or even worse is people, what I used to do in some of my other channels is I would look at it and be like, okay, this might be a little bit risky to be on YouTube, so I'm going to put it on BitChute only. And then they look at BitChute and they're like, hey, we're seeing what you're putting out there elsewhere, so we're going to hold the content that you didn't put on our channel accountable to our channel's rules. So there's that nonsense. So like, like I've said before, like you can, just because you don't make ad revenue from a particular thing, if you are trying to direct traffic to your own personal site, if you're trying to get things over, like please by all means go to buy me a coffee and leave me a couple bucks for all the hard work that I do. But like, there's things like that. There's other ways of monetizing something. So really any type of social media platform can be used to monetize something else, as long as you're redirecting, like, hey, if you want to make money, come over here. So like there is that. But a lot of how much money you're going to be making from something is how many users are on the platform. So, it can be a boon for small channels and kind of like you're going to hit a ceiling at some point. So I've been very lucky. I've been getting hundreds of views and it's been growing. When I was on this channel and I was kind of making things more regularly, there's actually a video in the description below to kind of explain why I haven't been around. However, I was growing pretty rapidly here because this is a small pool. There are not a lot of people who create original content here. And a lot of the content that is on this channel is kind of like, I make one video and I put it on 30 channels. So there's not really like a lot of big names here. And I know a lot of people for their own moral reasons were like, well, I like, my personal favorite personality on social media is Razorfest, and he's on BitChute, but he's also on a ton of other platforms. And a lot of people, like for me, I like to watch his content here because I don't want to give money to YouTube and so on. Though I also realize that there's no monetization for me having watched it here. So like if I were to go onto YouTube and watch one of his videos there, he might make a fraction of a penny or whatever. Whereas if I do it here, he's not making that fraction of a penny. Like I do think about that, but a lot of people, just for their own moral reasons, are trying to stay off of YouTube. So it's like, well, if I put my video out on 30 different platforms, I'll get the different audiences that are on only those platforms, though obviously your largest one is going to be YouTube. But I also realize that even if I were to get 100%, which is unrealistic, but 100% of the daily user base watch every single video I put up, it's going to hit a cap that is much lower than even if I do reasonably well and am the #1 person in my niche on YouTube. Like even if I'm person number 8 in my niche on YouTube, I will have a larger following than if I get 100% of the daily users over here. So while it is easier to get a following here and to get closer to that, theoretical 100% user base here, there's so many more users on YouTube, so you have to look at the entirety of the user base. You also have to look at the tech. Like some of these that I've learned for videos, they have very specific video requirements, and some of them are really bad. Like I know that one, and I'm going to look up this particular so I don't speak out of turn, but there's one video platform, and they are awful. Like it has to be a certain format, which is like the worst format. Like I would have to shoot in a weird format that can convert to it in my video editor, and then it has to be under a certain like, I'm going to get all of the details here wrong, but like a certain resolution that I don't know, like it would be really bad everywhere else. So like I would have to do all of my videos in a format that could format over to that in order to put things on there. And like I would also have to like then make another edit from my editor specifically for like there's so many things I would have to do that I can't imagine if I wasn't focused on growing a channel there that I would do all of that work, if that makes any sense. So yeah, like I don't even like even when I was trying to do the shotgun approach and not grow my audience in one area, wasn't worth it. So I didn't do that. So tech is a big one. Who's big on the channel pretty much tells you what kind of an audience there is. Like, most of the alt tech that is out there tends to be more conservative leaning, and I know that a lot of people aren't going to like that kind of moniker of conservative leaning, because like I know some of these platforms I would say are more libertarian, some of them are a little bit like center left, or I would say classical liberal in their approach. Some of them are like straight rhino conservative, some of them are more Trump conservative. Like I know that there kind of felt like there was a betrayal because Getter was originally like the Trump platform, and then Trump's like, yeah, I'm going to start my own, it's going to be Truth, and Getter kind of got pushed out there. I also want to talk about like the practices of like how you grow follower bases, kind of the controversies that come through, and also just like the red tape of what it means to start a new account. Like I will say that for a lot of the grandfathered old accounts, it's really hard to start like a new business channel, because you can't have your old phone number attached, which means you kind of have to get a new number just for the account. It's really easy to get blocked. I've talked on this channel about the reason I don't have Instagram. I created a channel, I created an account, and I got immediately flagged for hate speech, even though I hadn't made one post. Like, I don't know if they were looking at this channel and are like, that guy's going to be problems, or if it was an issue of, or what the issue. Like, there was literally no posts. It literally just was my name, my stage name, my business name, Fjall.Adamir, which, if you haven't figured out, is just Icelandic for Mount Doom, which is, both a reference to my favorite band and Lord of the Rings, but my favorite book. So, kind of dorky Viking lore kind of thing. But yeah, like that's definitely not hate speech, unless you think Lord of the Rings is hate speech. Maybe Vikings are hate speech. I know that's kind of been argued that like if you like Vikings, it's because there was once a white supremacist who also liked the Vikings, so figure it out if you're white and you like Vikings. That kind of nonsense. So those are the things I kind of want to break down each and every social media network by that criteria, and just kind of where is your business most likely going to get results, and is the shotgun method of taking the time to not only post all of these sites, but then you have to figure people are going to comment, you're going to need to respond, how active are you going to be in those communities. Like if I'm a business, especially a small business, and I hire someone to be my social media network, or my social media expert, which is usually some college idiot, and you hire someone and you're like, yeah, I want you to be on all the platforms. How many of those kids are you willing to hire? Because like realistically, as a full-time job, I feel like you could maybe do 3 or 4 platforms and really be dialed into them as your full-time job. Also, probably not creating the content, but just actually running the accounts. It's a lot of work. And I can tell you this from both working with companies and being that guy, as well as running my own. There is a lot of time and effort that you would not consider that goes into that. So if I'm a company and I'm like, hey, I definitely need a Facebook, I definitely need an Instagram, I definitely need a Twitter, I definitely need I don't know, maybe let's get a Getter or whatever. Okay, are you going to get blocked from Twitter for having a Getter? Are you going to get blocked from one of these other sites for being on both? A lot of these older, like where are you most likely to get the most bang for your buck for your money, especially if you're new and starting out? So I kind of want to go over all of these and kind of go in through the ins and outs of, if I were starting a new business and I could only be on one of these, which would it be? And obviously my answer for myself has been BitChute. I've also talked about the problems that it has, but I also want to be fair and talk about all the different alternatives and why they are a good or not good alternative.